Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight we're sinking into a story that's a little tragic, a little ridiculous, and entirely about princes who somehow managed to be born at the top of the social ladder, only to trip over it in the most spectacular ways. So grab your blanket, maybe dim the lights, take a sip of tea or something stronger if history tends to depress you. Because tonight, we're not celebrating kings or conquerors. Nope, we're looking at the poor souls who got the title of prince, but never really got the benefits. The unluckiest princes in the world. And trust me, there are more of them than you'd think. Let's start with the obvious candidate, the French one. Because when it comes to bad luck in royal families, you just know France is going to serve us something. Prince Louis Joseph, the forgotten son of France. Once upon a Versailles, there was a little boy named Louis Joseph. He was the son of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. Yes, that Marie Antoinette. The one who never actually said let them eat cake, but still got blamed for basically every famine in France. Now, you'd think being the firstborn son of the King and Queen of France would be a pretty cushy gig. Future throne, endless silk outfits, Versailles fountains at your disposal. But this is French royalty. And if there's one thing they were good at in the 18th century, it was being catastrophically cursed. Louis Joseph was born in 1781, and everyone celebrated like, finally, the Bourbon dynasty is secure. Except, spoiler, it wasn't. Because by the time he was just 7 years old, little Louis Joseph was coughing his lungs out from tuberculosis. And in case you're wondering, no, Versailles doctors weren't exactly paragons of modern medicine. Their big idea was to let him rest in damp, drafty rooms, which, surprise, didn't work. So, by 1789, the same year that angry Parisians were storming the Bastille, Louis Joseph quietly died in his bed at the age of 7. France didn't just lose a prince that day, it lost the better option. Because the throne then passed to his little brother, Louis Charles. And if you know French Revolution trivia, you know what happened next. Yes, that's the poor kid we now call Louis XVII. Louis XVII, the prince who grew up in a prison. So, Louis XVII. He technically became king when his dad got guillotined. Technically. In reality, he was about 10 years old, locked in a tower, and being neglected by jailers who couldn't care less that he was supposed to be royalty. You'd think, oh, maybe they treated him okay out of pity. Nope. Revolutionary guards allegedly left him in filth, starved him, and tried to indoctrinate him into hating his own parents. That last part sort of worked, because the boy under duress signed a confession accusing Marie Antoinette of incest, which, yeah, probably traumatized him for the remainder of his short life. He died at the age of 10 in 1795, malnourished, isolated, and completely forgotten. Meanwhile, grown men were running around Europe pretending to be him, claiming, "Oh, I escaped. I'm the real Louis XVII." Because apparently one traumatized, dead child wasn't enough. We also needed imposters to milk the tragedy for a century. Bad luck? Check. Okay, let's float over to Spain, because the Spanish royals never fail to provide material. Prince Baltasar Carlos, Spain's short-lived golden boy. Spain, mid-1600s. The Habsburg dynasty, the most famous inbred family tree in Europe. It was less of a tree and more of a tangled bush. And in the middle of it, we find Prince Baltasar Carlos, the son of King Philip IV of Spain. Born in 1629, he was hailed as the future savior of the dynasty. Spain was in decline. Everything was going downhill. so people pinned all their hopes on this one kid. And honestly, he had potential. By all accounts, Baltasar Carlos was smart, charming, actually liked by people, which was rare for a Habsburg. He even got painted by Velázquez, looking like a tiny knight with a sword twice his size. Which, to be fair, is kind of adorable. But here's the kicker. Just as he reached adolescence, the one time when Spain actually needed him, he got sick. Probably smallpox, maybe typhoid. Historians disagree. What we do know is he died at just 16. 16 years old, gone. And with him, Spain's best chance at not collapsing like a flan in a cupboard. The dynasty had to turn to other relatives, which led us straight to Charles II of Spain. You know the guy they literally called the Bewitched. The living, drooling proof that inbreeding is not a long-term strategy. So thanks, fate, for cutting Baltasar Carlos short. Now, let's drift over to England. Because if you think unlucky princes were only a continental thing, the Tudors and Stuarts are waiting with a polite cough. Prince Arthur, the almost king of England, Arthur Tudor, the eldest son of King Henry VII, born in 1486, named after the legendary King Arthur. His whole childhood was spent being groomed as the golden boy who'd usher in a new era. He was smart, diligent, and, most importantly, married off to a Spanish princess named Catherine of Aragon. Yes, that Catherine, the one who would later become the first wife of his little brother Henry VIII. So Arthur marries Catherine at 15. Everyone cheers. England and Spain are now BFFs. The future is bright. And then, Arthur suddenly drops dead, 6 months into the marriage. Cause? Some kind of sweating sickness. Basically Tudor flu on steroids. He was just 15. And here's where the royal soap opera kicks in. His widow, Catherine, swore that the marriage was never consummated, which was a convenient claim, because it allowed the Pope to say, "Sure, go ahead and marry Henry, Arthur's brother." And so Catherine became queen to Henry VIII, which, as you know, didn't exactly end well for her. If Arthur had just lived, maybe England would have had a nice, stable dynasty. No reformation, no 6 wives drama. But no, instead, Arthur went down in history as the unlucky footnote that triggered an entire century of religious chaos. Thanks, Arthur. Shall we move east? Because Russia always has a prince or two whose life reads like a very long, depressing novel. Tsarevich Alexei, the hemophiliac heir. Fast forward to the 20th century. The Russian Empire, last stop before collapse. Enter Alexei Romanov, the only son of Tsar Nicholas II and Tsarina Alexandra. Born in 1904, he was technically heir to one of the biggest empires on Earth. Sounds impressive. Except he had hemophilia. For those of you who don't know, hemophilia is a genetic condition where your blood doesn't clot properly, meaning even the tiniest bump could cause internal bleeding. Imagine being a little boy, never able to roughhouse or climb a tree because you might literally bleed to death. And because fate likes irony, Alexei inherited the condition from his great-great-grandmother, Queen Victoria. Yes, the infamous hemophilia gene donor. Thanks, Grandma. His illness wasn't just a personal tragedy. It had political consequences. His desperate parents turned to a certain wandering mystic named Rasputin, who convinced them he could heal the boy, which meant Rasputin gained massive influence at court, which, in turn, helped destabilize the monarchy even further. Alexei himself, he lived a short, fragile life, constantly in pain. And when the revolution finally came in 1917, He was executed with his entire family in that basement in Ekaterinburg. 14 years old, gone. The literal last prince of Imperial Russia. Unlucky doesn't even begin to cover it. We could stop here. But let's keep floating, because history is basically an endless parade of sad princes. Next up, Germany. Prince Rudolf, the Crown Prince of Austria, who hated his life. Okay, not technically just Germany, more like Austria, Hungary. Crown Prince Rudolf, son of Emperor Franz Joseph and Empress Elizabeth, aka Sisi. Born in 1858, he was heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. Sounds fancy, but in reality, it was miserable. His father was cold and authoritarian. His mother, Sisi, was too busy dieting, riding horses, and writing depressing poetry to really care for him. So Rudolf grew up lonely, unstable, and already half-broken. As he reached adulthood, he was forced into a loveless marriage with Princess Stephanie of Belgium. It went about as well as you'd expect. Rudolf drowned his sorrows in alcohol, hunting trips, and affairs. He was liberal-minded, hated his father's conservative politics, and basically realized he was trapped in a dynasty that would never let him be happy. And so, in 1889, he dragged his teenage mistress, Mary Vetsera, to a hunting lodge in Merling. The two were found dead the next morning in what was either a double suicide or a murder-suicide. He was just 30 years old. The death shocked Europe, destabilized the succession, and left Austria-Hungary scrambling for heirs, which, eventually, kind of indirectly paved the way to World War I. All because one unlucky prince couldn't stand his life anymore. And that, dear listeners, is just the beginning. Because we've barely scratched the surface of history's unlucky princes. In the next part, we'll drift toward even more stories of royal sons who never caught a break, whether it was disease, bad parenting, politics, or just plain old bad timing. So, let's refill the tea, adjust the blanket, and keep floating through this slow, sleepy parade of doomed heirs.